The emergency lights bathed Lawrence Mitchell's repair pod in an eerie crimson glow as he maneuvered carefully through the debris field surrounding a damaged communication satellite. Despite the interference that made his instruments behave erratically, his experienced hands moved deftly across the holographic controls, each touch precise. Lawrence fought to keep his Texas drawl steady despite the mounting concern that twisted in his gut. "Houston, we've got a situation here," he reported. "My readings are all over the place. The electromagnetic field is unlike anything we've got on record." Static crackled through his headset, and Mission Control's response broke into unintelligible bursts. The sophisticated equipment surrounding him, worth millions and representative of humanity's best space technology, began to malfunction spectacularly. Warning lights flared, and the pod systems threw out conflicting error codes. Suddenly, a brilliant azure light erupted in front of him, so bright and otherworldly that it overwhelmed the emergency lighting. Lawrence's stomach lurched, a jolt of nausea striking as the very fabric of space around him seemed to warp and twist. It looked as though reality itself was glitching, contorting like a digital image struggling to stay coherent. The pod's alarms screamed in protest, their urgent alerts merging with the thunderous sound of his own heartbeat. "Mayday, mayday!" Lawrence called out, his voice tight with fear. "This is Engineer Lawrence Mitchell. I'm losing control. Something's pulling me in, some kind of spatial anomaly." Desperation took hold as he tried activating the emergency protocols, but nothing responded. The pod's trajectory spiraled out of control, sucked into a vortex of light. Space tore open to reveal a breathtaking yet impossible world, a planet of crystalline mountains, shimmering with rainbow refractions in the light of an alien sun. Azure forests stretched endlessly, glowing with a luminescent beauty that defied understanding. The pod hurtled through a violet-tinged atmosphere, the heat shields glowing red-hot as they battled against the brutal forces of re-entry. With a violent impact, the world spun into darkness. Lawrence awoke slowly, consciousness returning alongside the whisper of alien winds and the gentle touch of something cool against his face. He opened his eyes and found himself lying on a bed of phosphorescent moss, surrounded by an extraordinary sight. Women, beautiful beyond anything he'd ever imagined, stood around him. Their skin was painted in hues reminiscent of summer skies and tropical oceans, their features both familiar and ethereal. They moved with a grace that defied his understanding, each step mesmerizing. Their bodies were so flawlessly proportioned that Lawrence's mind, trained to think in practical engineering terms, struggled to comprehend the mathematics behind such perfection. They spoke to each other in a language that sounded like music given voice, their expressions ranging from curiosity to something that made his pulse race. One of them, with cascading silver-white hair and eyes that shifted between amethyst and gold, knelt beside him. She held up a small crystal device, which hummed with internal light. "Can you understand my words now, Starfallen One?" she asked, her voice melodic and accented, making English sound like poetry. Lawrence pushed himself up, his head spinning with dizziness. "Yes." "How is this possible?" She smiled, revealing teeth that shimmered with their own inner light. "Universal Translator," she explained. "Though we call it the Voice Bridge. I'm Arona, daughter of the Twilight Clan. You've landed on Moria, though many call it Azura." Her eyes sparkled with a curiosity that seemed to unearth his very soul. "Your arrival is more significant than you could possibly understand." Before Lawrence could make sense of her cryptic statement, another woman stepped forward. She carried herself with an unmistakable air of authority, her azure skin decorated with intricate, shifting patterns. Her voice, deep and commanding, resonated through the clearing. "I am Trya, elder of the southern clans," she announced, her tone rich with gravitas. The prophecies spoke true. The Starfallen One arrives as darkness gathers. Lawrence's rational, scientific mind rebelled against the mystical undertones. "Look, I appreciate the warm welcome," he began, "but there's been a mistake. I'm just an engineer who got caught in a spatial anomaly." A harsh laugh cut him off. A male voice, as cold as an Arctic wind, sliced through the murmurs. "Indeed, a mistake," it sneered. The crowd parted to reveal a tall, imposing figure whose presence demanded attention. His skin was so pale it bordered on white, and his glacier-like eyes were as unforgiving as a frozen wasteland. He moved with predatory grace, each step deliberate. "Nord," Arona whispered, her tone laced with warning. "Champion of the Frost Valleys. Ambitious beyond his abilities." Nord's icy gaze swept over Lawrence, brimming with disdain. "Surely you don't believe this soft-skinned outsider fulfills the ancient writings?" he challenged. "The trial of ascension is near, and you dare consider him worthy?" Arona quickly explained to Lawrence, "The trial determines our next leader." But Nord speaks out of fear. He knows the prophecy better than most. Tria raised her hand, silencing the rising tension. "The trial begins at moonrise," she declared. "All eligible candidates must participate." "Wait," Lawrence protested, struggling to his feet. "I'm not eligible for anything. I need to contact Earth and fix my pod." His words were interrupted as two women emerged from the crowd. They wore robes that shimmered as if woven from starlight, moving in perfect synchronization. Their presence commanded an almost reverent silence. "Your vessel is beyond salvation," one of them, Asia, said softly. Her voice carried an ancient wisdom, her eyes calm and knowing. "The crossing between worlds has reduced it to little more than scrap." "And you cannot return through the veil," added Ella, her voice warm and honey-like, "not until the prophecy runs its course." Lawrence felt trapped, his logical mind unable to grapple with the fantastical events unfolding around him. "Look, He was cut off as Tria stepped forward, but she suddenly stumbled. Lawrence, trained by years in zero gravity, moved instinctively to catch her. They spun together in a movement that looked almost rehearsed, like a dance. The crowd gasped, and Arona's eyes widened in astonishment. "The first dance," she whispered in awe. "You've fulfilled it." As the trial's opening ritual commenced, Lawrence felt the weight of expectation hanging heavily in the air. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and he could sense Nord's fury simmering just below the surface. "This is sacrilege," Nord shouted, his face contorted with rage. "He knows nothing of our ways." Asia, the elder who had welcomed Lawrence, stepped forward with confidence. "The Starfallen One has accepted the challenge through deed if not word," she declared firmly. Ella, another woman from the gathering, moved gracefully beside her, her robes catching the light of the setting sun. "The trial consists of 3 tests: grace, wisdom, and strength. They must be completed before the 3 moons align." Lawrence found himself swept up in a whirlwind of preparation. Arona remained by his side, guiding him through their customs as attendants dressed him in ceremonial garments that shifted colors with his movements. "The grace trial tests your ability to move in harmony with our world," she explained, leading him toward a crystalline amphitheater that sparkled like a jewel in the dusk. "The wisdom trial challenges your mind and judgment. And for strength—" She hesitated, her gaze darting to Nord. "Well, Nord has never lost a trial of strength." As darkness fell, the first trial began, and Lawrence discovered that his training as an engineer in space gave him unexpected advantages. The low-gravity movements required for the grace trial mirrored the choreographed maneuvers he had practiced for spacewalks. To everyone's surprise, especially Nord's, Lawrence completed the intricate dance patterns with a natural fluidity that impressed the audience. His years of precise movement in zero gravity translated perfectly into the ritual's requirements, leaving the onlookers, including the haughty Nord, wide-eyed in astonishment. The wisdom trial, however, proved far more challenging. Ancient riddles and moral dilemmas tested not just his intelligence but also his understanding of their culture. Lawrence relied heavily on his engineering problem-solving skills and found surprising parallels between their philosophical questions and humanity's own struggles with technology and progress. When faced with a riddle that asked him to choose between personal gain and communal benefit, he made the choice to sacrifice his own advantage for the greater good, much to the approval of many onlookers. In contrast, Nord's solutions favored personal power, eliciting murmurs of disapproval. The strength trial was something else entirely. It took place in an arena carved from living crystal, where the very ground pulsed with energy, making Lawrence acutely aware of the raw power surrounding him. Arona touched his arm before he entered the arena, her voice low and serious. "Remember, strength here isn't measured only in muscle," she cautioned. As the trial began, Nord showcased his devastating power. His pale blue form moved like a winter storm, striking the crystalline pillars with blows that shattered them into shards. Lawrence watched, impressed but undeterred. When it was his turn, he approached the challenge with a different strategy. Instead of matching Nord's sheer destruction with brute force, he focused on control and efficiency. Using leverage and calculated force, he achieved the same results with minimal energy expenditure, demonstrating a mastery that surprised everyone. The deciding moment arrived when both men faced a seemingly impossible challenge, moving a massive crystal sphere up an inclined plane. Nord attacked it directly, straining against its weight with all his might. Lawrence studied the sphere, locating specific points where applied pressure could create a rolling momentum. With careful calculation, he pushed the sphere, feeling the shift in weight and angle. As the sphere reached the top of the incline, Lawrence caught Nord's murderous glare. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The ceremony concluded with Lawrence's unexpected victory as the three moons aligned overhead, their ethereal light casting a glow over the arena. Tria formally declared him their new leader, much to Nord's barely contained fury. Later that night, Lawrence sat in his chambers, his mind swirling with confusion and disbelief. The events of the past several hours had been beyond comprehension, an impossible planet, ancient prophecies, and somehow he had become the center of it all. His entire life as an engineer had been rooted in logic and the laws of physics, yet here, reality bent to forces that defied everything he understood. The room around him was an architectural marvel, with crystalline walls that pulsed gently with an internal glow, the energy within them shifting in time with his heartbeat as if the very structure were alive. It felt surreal, like a waking dream he couldn't quite shake. He ran his hand over the smooth surface of the bed, its texture soft and cool under his fingers. The luxury of it all contrasted sharply with the intensity of the trials he had just completed. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Before he could respond, Asia and Ella entered the room, their presence commanding yet graceful. They were both clad in light ceremonial robes that shimmered in the glow of the room, as though woven from starlight. The two women radiated beauty and power, their movements fluid and in perfect harmony, like two forces of nature in tandem. "The trial is over," Asia said, her voice a smooth whisper as she stepped closer to Lawrence, her gaze steady and unwavering. "But our traditions have only just begun." Ella followed her, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips as she approached him. There was a playful, almost mischievous glint in her eyes. "There are other responsibilities of leadership, Starfallen One. You must learn to lead us in all ways," she added, her tone laced with invitation. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't the kind of tension he had felt during the trials. This was something far more personal, far more primal. His breath caught in his throat as Asia moved closer, her hands gliding across his chest with a feather-light touch. Her lips curved into a smile that spoke of ancient secrets and intimate knowledge. "My lord," Asia whispered, her voice low and sultry. "It would be unbefitting for a leader to sleep in the cold. Allow me to warm your bed." Her fingers grazed his arm as she slowly began to undo the ties of her shimmering robe. Lawrence's eyes widened, unable to tear his gaze away as the fabric slid from her shoulders, revealing her flawless azure skin beneath. It shimmered like the surface of a calm ocean at sunset, captivating him completely. With a smooth, deliberate movement, she allowed the robe to fall completely, pooling at her feet. She gracefully slipped onto his bed, her body a vision of perfection against the soft surface. Ella let out a soft laugh, drawing his attention back to her. "It seems I've grown clumsy, my lord," she said, feigning a stumble as the delicate fabric of her own robe slipped from her body in an almost accidental display. As she bent down slowly, her movements calculated and deliberate, Lawrence's heart raced. He found himself torn between the weight of his new responsibilities and the undeniable allure of the two women before him, both powerful and mesmerizing. In that moment, Lawrence realized that he was not merely an outsider anymore. He had become a central figure in a world that demanded both leadership and a deeper understanding of its ways. And as the reality of his new life began to sink in, he felt an overwhelming sense of possibility unfurling before him, filled with challenges, temptations, and the promise of adventure unlike anything he had ever experienced. Lawrence's breath caught as Ella retrieved her garment, arching her back in a way that left little to the imagination. His mouth went dry, and he felt utterly at a loss for words. His mind spun between disbelief and undeniable attraction. The logical part of him screamed that this was insane, yet a far more primal part was utterly mesmerized by the beauty before him. "Oh dear," Ella purred, standing back up and straightening her posture with a knowing smile. "I've been so careless. Perhaps I need to be punished for my misstep, my lord." Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she moved closer to him, her voice dropping to a teasing whisper. "It's important to rule us with a firm hand. You wouldn't want your subjects to think they can act without consequence, would you? Lawrence's heart raced at the playful yet serious undertone of her words, sending shivers down his spine. His mind flashed through 100 different responses, but none seemed adequate. The room felt as if it were closing in around him, the weight of the moment pressing down on his senses. The women's eyes were fixed on him, waiting for his reaction. "I don't think punishment is necessary," Lawrence managed to say, his voice unsteady. But even as he spoke, Ella's teasing smile widened. "Are you sure, my lord?" she whispered, her breath warm against his neck as she leaned in, her fingers lightly brushing his chest. "Perhaps you'd prefer to bind me to remind me of my place." Asia, still lounging on the bed, stretched languidly, her bare form radiant in the dim light. "Or perhaps," she mused, her voice dripping with sensuality, "you'd prefer something more traditional? A whip, perhaps?" Lawrence blinked, his thoughts a maelstrom of confusion, desire, and amusement. The playful yet dangerous dance the women were weaving around him had him on edge, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward them. He had faced unimaginable challenges in the trials that day, and now this was a test of a different sort. Asia sat up slowly, her movement deliberate, as if savoring each second. "You are our leader now, Lawrence," she said softly, her gaze locking onto his. "You must prove yourself worthy in all things. Our people require a leader who is not only strong in mind and body but also in passion." Ella's hand moved to his shoulder, sliding down his arm with a feather-light touch. "You wouldn't want to disappoint us, would you?" A deep breath escaped Lawrence's lungs. He had never imagined himself in a situation like this, certainly not with two stunningly beautiful women from another world. But as surreal as it was, he couldn't deny the desire that had been building within him. He wasn't the type to shy away from a challenge, and this too was a challenge. His decision made, Lawrence stood and turned toward the bed where Asia lay waiting, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I suppose there are some traditions that I should honor," he said, his voice steady now, his hesitation gone. Asia smiled, her expression one of approval and satisfaction as he approached her. "That's the spirit, my lord," she purred, her fingers reaching for him as he joined her on the bed. Ella moved in behind him, her hands running gently across his shoulders as she leaned in to whisper in his ear. "Perhaps we should make sure you understand just how important it is to lead with confidence. After all, a leader who hesitates is a leader who falls." Her words were like a spark igniting the tension between them. What followed was a blur of passion and connection, the teasing and knowing smiles melting into something far more intimate and primal. The air in the room was thick with the scent of desire, their bodies intertwining as they explored one another in the soft glow of the crystalline walls. Lawrence found himself lost in the moment, the logical, rational part of him fading away as instinct took over. Asia's soft skin against his, her whispered words in his ear, the warmth of her body as they moved together in perfect rhythm, it was intoxicating. Ella, with her mischievous grin and knowing touch, added an element of playful seduction that only heightened the experience. They moved together in harmony, no words needed, as they communicated through touch and sensation. Lawrence had never experienced anything like this, a connection so deep, so immediate. Every touch, every breath was in sync, as if they had all been waiting for this moment for longer than he could understand. The night stretched on, filled with moments of intensity and passion. The tension that had filled the room at the beginning of the evening gave way to something deeper, something that felt almost sacred. By the time the moons had shifted in the sky, Lawrence lay between the two women, their bodies curled against his. The weight of their presence grounded him in a reality that was still too strange to fully grasp. He had come to this world by accident, but now, in this moment, it didn't feel like an accident at all. Dawn broke over the crystalline spires of the Azure Temple, painting the sky in impossible shades of lavender and gold. Lawrence sat in the meditation chamber, his mind still reeling from the previous night's cultural exchange. Trya had insisted on beginning his education early, despite his obvious exhaustion. "Your position demands understanding," Trya said, her elegant form settling across from him on a cushion of bioluminescent moss. "Our people face challenges beyond mere leadership succession." Lawrence tried to focus on her words rather than the way her skin shimmered in the morning light. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. The trial, these customs," he gestured vaguely, thinking of Asia and Ella's nocturnal visit. Trya's expression grew serious. "There is purpose in all our traditions, Lawrence, even those that might seem recreational to you." Before he could respond, Ella swept into the chamber, her healer's robes adorned with crystalline instruments. "Elder Tria, if I might borrow our new leader, there are matters in the archives that require his attention." Tria nodded, a knowing look passing between the women. "The morning lessons can wait. This is equally important." Ella led Lawrence through the winding corridors of the temple, the crystalline architecture shimmering around them. The halls were filled with bioluminescent plants that cast a gentle glow, illuminating the path as they walked side by side. Lawrence couldn't help but steal glances at Ella. The soft contours of her face and the way her hair framed it were mesmerizing. He felt the remnants of their passionate night tingling in his veins, an intoxicating mix of exhilaration and bewilderment. As they entered the archives, a vast room filled with ancient texts and holographic displays, Lawrence's sense of wonder deepened. The walls were lined with scrolls and books that seemed to pulse with energy, each one containing knowledge that was as alien as it was fascinating. Ella moved to a central console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she activated a series of holograms that illuminated the room in vibrant colors. "We need to understand the histories of our people," Ella explained, her voice filled with urgency. "The challenges we face are deeply rooted in our past. Our traditions may seem strange to you, but they are a reflection of our survival." Lawrence stepped closer, captivated by the intricate designs and symbols floating before him. "What exactly are these challenges?" he asked, curiosity driving him forward. Ella paused, her expression turning serious. "Our clans are divided. The prophecies speak of unity, but factions continue to fight for power. We need a leader who can bridge these divides, someone who understands both the heart of our people and the logic of governance." As she spoke, Lawrence felt the weight of his new role pressing down on him. He was no longer just an engineer lost in space. He was now a leader in a world where every decision could have far-reaching consequences. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "First, you must learn our history," Ella replied. "Only by understanding where we come from can you hope to guide us into the future. You need to know our leaders, our legends, and the mistakes that have brought us to this point." Lawrence nodded, determination settling in. He had faced trials that tested his physical and mental limits, but this challenge felt different, more profound and complex. "Show me," he said. "I want to learn." Ella smiled, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "Good. Let's start with the stories of the great leaders. Each one has a lesson, a reflection of the challenges they faced. Understanding their decisions will help you forge your path." As they delved into the histories of the clans, Lawrence found himself captivated by tales of heroism, betrayal, and sacrifice. Each story unfolded like a tapestry, revealing the intricate relationships that had shaped their society. He learned about the early leaders who had united the clans against a common enemy, and he studied the rifts that had formed over time, driven by greed and ambition. Ella guided him through the narratives, her insights weaving together the threads of history into a coherent picture. With every tale, Lawrence felt a growing sense of purpose. He wasn't just a visitor in this world, he was meant to play a significant role in its future. As they moved through the archives, he could sense a bond forming between them, a shared mission that transcended their initial encounter. Ella was no longer just a beautiful woman from another world. She was a partner, a guide, and perhaps even a friend in this unfamiliar terrain. Hours passed, and the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the crystalline spires outside. Lawrence's breath caught in his throat as he followed Ella through the corridors of the Azure Temple, which descended deep into the living crystal of the structure. The walls pulsed with an inner light that seemed to respond to their presence, illuminating their path. "Our archives hold secrets," Ella explained, her usual playful demeanor replaced by a focused professionalism. "Secrets that might explain why our people face extinction." As they entered the archive chamber, Lawrence was struck by the sheer magnitude of the space. Holographic displays flickered between the crystalline columns, showcasing intricate genetic sequences and population statistics that he could barely comprehend. "For the past century, our births have been almost exclusively female," Ella said, pulling up detailed charts that depicted the troubling data. "The few males born are often like Nord, cold, aggressive, unlike our ancestors." Lawrence studied the data intently, his engineering mind kicking into gear. "These patterns aren't natural," he said, a frown creasing his brow. "There's some kind of external interference in your genetic code." "Precisely," Ella replied, her fingers dancing across the controls. "That's why we need your help. Your outsider's perspective combined with your technical knowledge could be crucial. Before Lawrence could respond, a commotion from above interrupted them. Asia burst into the chamber, her warrior's grace evident in every movement. "Lawrence, we have a situation. Nord's been seen meeting with Offworlders in the Crystal Caves." "Offworlders?" Lawrence's head snapped up, a frown settling on his face. "I thought I was the first in centuries to come openly." Asia corrected him, her eyes hard. "Others skulk in the shadows, trading in flesh and misery across the stars." The implications hit Lawrence like a physical blow. "Slavers. We've suspected Nord's involvement," Asia continued, moving closer. "But proving it has been impossible until now." The next few days passed in a blur of investigation and education. Between Tria's lessons in tribal law and custom, Ella's genetic research, and Asia's combat training, Lawrence barely had time to breathe. Yet, he couldn't deny his growing attraction to each of them. Arona proved to be an unexpected ally, showing him hidden paths through the Crystal Forest where they could speak privately. "Nord's people, the Frost Valley clan, they've always been different," Arona explained during one of their walks. "More isolated, more prone to dealing with outsiders." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of engines definitely not native to this world. Lawrence pulled Arona behind a crystal formation as a sleek black ship descended into a hidden valley. "Slavers," Arona whispered, her body tensing. "They're getting bolder." Lawrence watched, his heart racing, as Nord emerged from the shadows to meet the ship's crew. The pale blue man's gestures were animated and angry. Something had clearly changed in their plans. "We need to warn the others," Lawrence said urgently, but Arona grabbed his arm. "Wait. Look." The ship's captain had emerged, a massive figure in dark armor. Even from this distance, Lawrence could see Nord's submissive body language. He wasn't in charge of this operation, he was just a pawn. Back at the temple, Lawrence gathered his inner circle. Asia paced like a predatory cat as he shared what they'd witnessed. "The timing makes sense," Ella said, consulting her crystal tablet. "Our genetic degradation began around the same time the Frost Valley clan started their exclusive trading arrangements." Tria's face darkened. "They've been poisoning our bloodline deliberately, making us dependent on outside mates, which makes us vulnerable to their real plan. A whole planet of beautiful, exotic women to sell to the highest bidders across the galaxy," Asia added, her warrior instincts sharp. Lawrence felt sick. His accidental victory in the trial had disrupted generations of careful planning. No wonder Nord was desperate. "We need proof," Arona insisted. "Something concrete to show the Council." "I might have an idea," Lawrence said, his engineer's mind racing. "Ella, those genetic markers you showed me, they're artificial, right? If we could trace the source." Their investigation led them deep into Frost Valley territory. Lawrence found himself grateful for Asia's combat training as they dodged Nord's patrols. Ella's knowledge of genetics proved invaluable as they collected evidence, while Arona's familiarity with the crystal formations kept them hidden. But it was Tria who made the crucial discovery. "These symbols," she said, examining ancient cave markings, "they're not decorative. They're coordinates, shipping routes." Their successful infiltration didn't go unnoticed. That night, as Lawrence reviewed their findings with the Council, the temple's warning crystals flashed crimson. "Multiple ships approaching," Asia announced, rushing into the chamber. "Heavy weapon signatures." "Nord has made his move," Lawrence said, dread settling in his stomach. "The slavers aren't waiting any longer." The first explosion rocked the crystal spires, sending shards of glittering material flying. Lawrence watched in horror as massive black ships descended through the purple sky, their weapon ports glowing with deadly intent. "Get everyone to the shelter caves," he ordered, falling naturally into command. Asia and her warriors moved to defensive positions while Ella led the evacuation. "Lawrence!" Arona grabbed his arm. "The archive! If they destroy our genetic records." He nodded, adrenaline surging through him. "Tria, coordinate the evacuation. Asia, buy us time. Ella, with me and Arona, we need to secure that data." As they raced through the chaos, Lawrence caught glimpses of the battle above. The slavers had come in force, clearly intending to take what they wanted and destroy any resistance. He could see the massive black ships hovering ominously, their designs cruel and efficient. As they reached the archive entrance, Lawrence was struck by the gravity of the situation. Nord appeared, flanked by armed mercenaries. His pale blue skin seemed to glow with triumph. "You should have stayed on your own world, Lawrence," he sneered. "This could have been so much easier. Easier to sell an entire civilization into slavery," Lawrence retorted, positioning himself between Nord and the women. "Nord," he continued, anger flaring in his chest. "Is that what the Frost Valley clan has become? Traffickers." Nord's composure cracked, revealing a hint of vulnerability. "We adapted to survive. While the rest of you clung to ancient ways, we embraced galactic reality. There's no room for isolation anymore." Asia appeared silently behind Nord's group, her warriors moving like shadows, ready to strike. Lawrence kept him talking. "So instead of protecting your people, you sold them out. You created a genetic crisis to make them vulnerable. You don't understand," Nord shouted, his frustration evident. "The galaxy doesn't care about your traditions. It's a brutal place, and we have to find our way in it." "By enslaving your own people?" Lawrence challenged, refusing to back down. "You could have found another way. You think you can just come here and judge us?" Nord shot back, his anger flaring. "You're an outsider. You have no idea what it's like to live under constant threat, to make choices for the survival of your clan." Lawrence felt the weight of those words, but he couldn't let Nord sway him. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice steady. "And now, you'll face the consequences." As the tension in the room escalated, Arona and Asia moved to flank him, their presence a silent show of strength. "It's time to put an end to this," Asia said, her eyes fixed on Nord, who was visibly rattled by their defiance. In that moment, Lawrence realized that he wasn't just fighting for the women beside him. He was fighting for the future of an entire civilization. The stakes had never been higher, and as the slavers' ships loomed above, he understood that their fight for survival had only just begun. "They'll survive." Nord's smile was cruel, a twisted smirk that sent a shiver down Lawrence's spine. "They'll just belong to new masters." The fight erupted without warning. Asia's warriors struck with practiced precision, their movements fluid and lethal as they engaged Nord's mercenaries. Meanwhile, Ella and Arona raced to secure the archives. Lawrence found himself facing Nord directly, the pale man's combat style as cold as his demeanor, efficient, lethal, and devoid of mercy. But Lawrence had learned from Asia, and more importantly, he had something worth fighting for. Their battle took them through the crystal corridors, each impact of their strikes sending rainbow refractions dancing across the walls. "Your people wanted this." Nord snarled between strikes, his breath heavy with rage. "They chose you, an outsider, over their own kind." "They chose hope," Lawrence countered, remembering Tria's lessons about leadership. "Something you've forgotten how to offer." The fighting above intensified. Through the crystal ceiling, they could see ships exchanging fire, but something was different. New vessels had arrived, their designs clearly allied with the temple. "The other clans." Arona's voice carried triumph. "They received our warning." Nord's distraction cost him dearly. Lawrence seized the moment, landing a decisive blow that sent the traitor crashing into a crystal column. As he fell, Asia's warriors moved swiftly, securing him and preventing any further retaliation from his allies. "The slavers are retreating," Asia reported, her voice a mix of relief and urgency. "Without their inside man, they won't risk a prolonged fight." Ella emerged from the archives, clutching the precious genetic records. "Everything's secure," she announced, her expression one of determination. "We can begin correcting the damage they've done to our people." As the three moons rose over the battle-scarred temple, Lawrence stood with his four closest advisors, each of them having proved invaluable in their own way. Asia's strength, Ella's knowledge, Arona's heart, and Tria's wisdom, all were crucial in their efforts to reclaim their future. "The hard part begins now," Tria said softly, her eyes reflecting the weight of the task ahead. "Rebuilding, healing. We'll face it together," Lawrence replied, feeling the unique bond that had formed between them. "All of us." A distant explosion lit the sky as the last slave ship was driven from Mirian space. The threat wasn't over. Lawrence knew Nord's allies wouldn't give up easily. But for now, they had won, and he was exactly where he needed to be. The following morning, Lawrence woke early, the soft light of the moons barely fading from the horizon as the sun began to rise. He found himself standing at the highest spire of the temple, looking out over the vast expanse of Mirian land below. The damage from the slavers' attack was significant, but already the people were at work. They moved with purpose, repairing the crystal structures and rebuilding what had been lost. Beautiful, isn't it? Lawrence turned to find Ella standing behind him. Her voice carried a hint of exhaustion, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. She had spent the night analyzing the data from their genetic archives, working tirelessly to uncover the truth behind their genetic crisis. Her blue skin glowed faintly in the morning light, and Lawrence couldn't help but admire her beauty, even now, after everything they had faced. "You found something," he said, noting the barely contained excitement behind her professional demeanor. "More than something," Ella replied, her fingers dancing across the surface of her crystal tablet as she stepped closer. "I've been studying your genetic markers against our historical records, comparing everything we had with the data from the slaver sabotage." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Lawrence, you're not just compatible with our people. You're the solution we've been seeking for generations." He frowned, the weight of what she was saying settling heavily on his shoulders. "The solution?" Ella stepped even closer, her breath warm against his skin. "Your genetic structure naturally counteracts the degradation the slavers introduced into our bloodline. If you have children with Mirian women, those children would be healthy, balanced, both males and females." Lawrence felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He had come to this world by accident, but it was clear now that his presence here was far from random. Ella blushed, a darker shade of blue coloring her cheeks. "Though I must admit, part of me wishes I didn't have to share this discovery, or you," she said, a flirtatious smile breaking the tension. The meaning behind her words was clear. She wanted him for herself. Lawrence couldn't deny the growing connection between them. Before he could respond, Asia appeared, moving with her characteristic silent grace. She was dressed in her warrior attire, her muscles tense beneath her flawless blue skin. "The council is gathering," she said, her tone serious. "Nord's trial begins soon." Lawrence nodded, his mind already shifting from Ella's revelation to the next challenge. The trial was crucial. Nord would answer for his crimes, but there was still so much at stake. The future of the Mirian people, their very survival, depended on the outcome of this day. The great hall was filled with tension as the council gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, the people whispering among themselves as Nord was brought before them. His pale blue form was bound, but he held himself with stubborn pride, his eyes cold and unrepentant. Tria stood at the center of the hall, her presence commanding. She was the voice of authority, earned through generations of leadership. "Nord of the Frost Valley clan," she began, her voice echoing throughout the chamber. "You stand accused of conspiracy with alien slavers, genetic sabotage of our people, and the attempted overthrow of legitimate authority." Nord's eyes flickered at the accusations, but he said nothing. The trial progressed with methodical precision. Evidence was presented, witnesses were called, and Nord's treachery was laid bare for all to see. But through it all, Nord remained defiant. His loyalty to his twisted vision of survival had blinded him to the harm he had caused. It wasn't until Lawrence stood to speak that the room fell silent. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on him as he faced the gathered council. "This was never about survival," Lawrence said, his voice steady and firm. "It was about power, a power you were willing to sell your own people for." Gasps echoed through the hall as his words hung in the air. "You put profit above the lives of your kin. Your actions have endangered not just the Mirians but the very future of our world." The crowd murmured, the tension palpable as they absorbed his words. Lawrence took a deep breath, pushing through the uncertainty that threatened to creep in. Survival isn't just about existing. It's about community, about protecting one another and working together to build a future. You chose to betray that for a chance at personal gain. Nord's face darkened, his pride wavering under the weight of Lawrence's accusations. "You don't understand," he spat. "The galaxy is a dangerous place. I did what I had to do to ensure our survival." "No," Lawrence replied, his voice rising. "You did what you wanted to do, regardless of the cost to your people. You have no idea what true leadership is about." Tria stepped forward, her gaze fierce. "And now you will face the consequences of your actions. The council has heard your case, and the evidence is clear." Nord's defiance crumbled, replaced by a flicker of fear. The whispers in the hall grew louder, uncertainty beginning to creep into the hearts of those who had once supported him. "We will not let you endanger our people any longer," Tria declared. "Your betrayal will not go unpunished." As the council deliberated, Lawrence felt a mix of relief and anticipation. They had come this far, but the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. He glanced at Ella and Asia, their faces a mix of hope and determination. Together, they would face whatever came next. The verdict would change everything, and Lawrence was ready to fight for the future of the Mirian people, no matter the cost. But filled with emotion, Lawrence continued, his voice steady, it was about power. You sold your people out for the chance to control them. You poisoned their bloodline, made them dependent on outsiders, all so you could maintain control. Nord sneered at him, his expression a mix of contempt and fury. You think you understand us? You're an outsider. You don't belong here. Lawrence took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his next words settle in the air around them. Maybe I am an outsider, but I fought for this world, for its people, and I've earned the right to stand here. The council murmured in agreement. The people of Moria had witnessed what Lawrence was capable of. He had led them in battle, protected their future, and now they looked to him for guidance. Tria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the assembly. The council has spoken. Nord, you are guilty of all charges. Your punishment will be exile. You will serve the rest of your days as a guard to the very man you tried to betray. Nord's face twisted in rage, but he didn't argue. His fate had been sealed, and there was nothing more he could do. Days turned into weeks as the Mirian people began to rebuild their shattered lives. The scars of the battle remained, but slowly the crystal spires were repaired, and the land began to heal. Lawrence threw himself into the work, leading by example. He worked alongside the Mirians, earning their respect not just through his title but through his actions. Ella and Lawrence grew closer during this time, spending many nights together as their bond deepened. It became clear that Lawrence was more than just a leader to her. He was the key to their genetic survival, the hope of a future where Mirian children could be born without the threat of extinction hanging over them. But Ella wasn't the only one who felt this connection. Asia, with her fierce warrior spirit, had also found herself drawn to Lawrence. Arona, with her gentle heart, and Tria, with her wisdom, all saw in him the potential for something greater. One night, as they sat together under the 3 moons, Ella turned to him, her expression serious despite the flirtatious glint in her eyes. You know what this means, don't you? She asked, her voice soft yet probing. Lawrence nodded, having thought about it often. The future of the Mirian people rested on his shoulders, but it wasn't just a burden, it was an honor. I don't like the idea of sharing you, Ella admitted, her voice teasing but honest, but it seems I'll have to. Lawrence chuckled softly, his heart light despite the gravity of the situation. I don't think you'll be the only one who feels that way, he replied, glancing around at the women who had come to mean so much to him. The day finally arrived when Lawrence was officially recognized as the leader of the Mirian people. The ceremony was grand, held in the great hall where they had once fought for survival. The people gathered, their eyes filled with hope as Lawrence stood before them, flanked by Tria, Asia, Ella, and Arona. Their presence was a testament to the unity they had forged together. They had rebuilt their world, and now they would lead it into the future. In gratitude for all you have done, Tria began, her voice strong and clear, the Mirian people recognize you, Lawrence, as our leader and as the husband to our most valued daughters. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices echoing off the crystalline walls. Lawrence felt a swell of pride and responsibility, but his mind was focused on the women beside him, Tria's wisdom, Asia's strength, Ella's knowledge, and Arona's heart. They were his family now, his future. Years passed, and the Mirian people thrived. The birth of both boys and girls became common once again, and the threat of extinction faded into a distant memory. Lawrence's children played in the temple gardens, their laughter echoing through the crystalline spires. Nord, once a traitor, now stood at Lawrence's side. He had been humbled by his exile, and over time he had come to understand the error of his ways. Now, he was Lawrence's most trusted ally, his right-hand man. Together, they worked to protect the Mirian people, ensuring their future was secure. I never thought I'd see the day, Nord said, watching as one of Lawrence's sons ran past him, the child's laughter filling the air. The day I'd be standing here guarding you and your children. Lawrence smiled, clapping Nord on the shoulder. Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? Nord nodded, his expression thoughtful. I was wrong about everything. You've made up for it, Lawrence replied, sincerity in his voice. And you've earned your place here. As the 2 men stood together, surrounded by the next generation of Mirian children, Lawrence felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had begun with a crash landing on a world he had never imagined, but it had led him to a destiny he never could have dreamed of, a family, a people, and a future filled with love and hope. Well, dear listeners, if you've made it this far, congratulations! You've just survived a crash landing, a planetary trial, a near-extinction event, a few romantic entanglements, and a little bit of genetic engineering. No big deal, right? Lawrence chuckled to himself as he thought about the twists and turns his life had taken. But let's be honest, he probably didn't expect to go from a humble engineer to the proud father of a whole new generation of beautiful, blue-skinned, perfectly proportioned Mirian children. Talk about an unexpected job promotion. So next time you're having a bad day at the office, just remember, at least you didn't accidentally become the savior of an entire alien race. Keep your perspective. And as for the rest of you, don't act like you wouldn't mind being in Lawrence's boots, surrounded by gorgeous, intelligent alien women, saving worlds and bringing balance to the galaxy. It's all in a day's work for a guy who just wanted to fix a satellite. But the real moral of the story? Always be prepared for a plot twist, especially if you're flying through space. You never know when you might crash land on a planet where you'll be crowned leader, husband, and genetic savior. Until next time, keep your spaceships in working order, and may your landings, intentional or not, be filled with unexpected adventure.